welcome to Politics, a podcast talking about politics in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. As always, I'm Adri, one of your hosts and a recovering English major. As you may already know, we are taking a 2-week break from the show as we prepare to dive in to Season 6, where we'll be covering Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Speaking of Season 6, you may have noticed that this episode was not published on a Saturday as our usual episodes are, but on a Monday instead. That's because we are going to be having a new release date for Season 6, Mondays. That means you get to say goodbye to your Monday blues because you will have us on your feed on Mondays, first thing. Amazing. Season 6 will begin Monday, July 19th, 2021, so keep an eye out for that episode in your feeds. But hey, we didn't want your podcast feeds to be empty. Last week, we released one of our Patreon exclusive episodes on this feed, and this week, we're going into our metaphorical Gringotts Patreon vault and releasing another one of these patron-only episodes that happen on a weekly basis in addition to the normal feed episode. If that's something that you would be interested in, and not just on a bonus situation like right now, you can head over to patreon.com/Occupolitics and access this and other rewards for as little as $2 a month. And with that being said, here's your bonus content. You are in the super secret Patreon segment.
Ooh.
How exciting and also mysterious.
Isn't it fantastic though? See the pun.
And fantastic is the name of the game. Because for today's Girl Who Lived segment, we are not talking about any canonical character in the 7 books of this Harry Potter series fandom.
He's mentioned in the
but like,
book.
you know, he's not like an actual character who does something in the series in the first 7, other than like the book exists, obviously.
Yep.
We are talking about my neurodiverse king, Newt Scamander.
Who also has a very fantastic full name, because his full name is Newt Artemis Fido Scamander. It's like very extra.
I am surprised he's not a Gryffindor, to be honest with you, with all the extra.
Yeah. Well, we still don't know which house his older brother has been in. He might have been the Gryffindor.
Yeah, he might have been the family extra, you know, like more extra than Newt. So we've got his whole full name as a mouthful. So we've got like you did a bunch of like breaking down of the name. So I'll let you have that since Celine's not here.
Yeah, I figured since Celine's not here, I sort of need to step into the role of the name. And can I just say kudos to Helene? I didn't realize how hard this was until I had to do it. I was like, oh, this is actually really difficult.
For it, she just makes it sound so easy.
Yeah,
because everything she does.
Them and I'm like, oh yeah, that works great. Okay, very obvious. Now that's the only obvious name choice. And then I sat here and I was like, okay, like it's overwhelming because there's too many names. But anyways,
you got the one with the 4 names.
Yeah, that didn't help. So Newt is short for Newton, which is basically a small lizard-like amphibian, so similar to a salamander. So that's his first name, and there's no other meaning I could find for that. So that's just salamander, basically. And I think you say it Artemis, because I think I mispronounced it just now, which is obviously named from Greek mythology, and she is a goddess of hunting. And that also the first two names can work for both genders because I looked them up and I was like, so Newton could also be a girl's name, and Artemis, obviously, because she is a goddess, very much also a female name.
So it's a very gender fluid name, like
Yeah,
names, first couple of names. I love it. Yeah.
yeah. So we could almost go the lazy route and be like Newt State News, because he could, or she could. Fido was very like. Do you even say Fido? Because I was gonna.
It would be, it's, I think in like Americans pronounce it Fido.
Okay, okay, Fido. Oh, interesting. It's sort of a generic pet
Yeah.
dog name.
Yeah. That's the John Smith or John Doe of dog names is Fido.
Yeah.
Like that's your basic.
But in Latin, and then I think you would pronounce it Fido, it means faithful, which I think makes sense for both a dog and Newt.
Yeah, for sure.
And for Scamander, all I could find is it sounds like salamander. So you
So
know
yes,
how Remus is Wolf McWolf. This is Salamander
this is
McSalamander.
Salamander, McSalamander. Yes. I like that Newton and Artemis work for both genders, but I think I know you have some other suggestions here for a first name.
Yeah. So I did some poking around, and I have a preferred one out of the two I found. I kid you not, I didn't realize that that is basically a gender flipped version of another character in the series until like much later. So there goes me. So one of the picks I have is Holly, which is derived from is an English nature name, and I thought that was very fitting for a Newt character because
Uh-huh.
he's very in tune with nature, and he's English, so or she's English, I should say. And then this is the one where I was like, this is really good. And then like hours later, I was like, oh, we actually have Lita in the like canon, but apparently Leto is also a female name because she's the Titaness of motherhood. And together with Zeus, she is the mother of the twin Olympians, Artemis and Apollo. So since we already have Artemis.
Yeah, I think that there's a different name for Leto as well. I think it's Leda, Leda.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I know that mythical feature. I think I like Holly a little bit better for this gender flipped version, but I like that you're like, oh, I like this name, and then it's like, wait a minute, there's a Leda Lestrange.
Exactly. I was like, oh, okay. There you go, brain.
It's just like, it's like, oh my goodness, she really did her research. But only on the names, not like cultural norms.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, okay, so we've got like Holly Scamander here.
Yeah, Holly Scamander.
And she is a neurodivergent or neurodiverse character. She is on the spectrum, which is not something we see a lot in female characters, I don't think, in this series or any series.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I've come across a female character on the spectrum, and I can't think of any right off the bat.
I only have male ones, the ones
Yes.
I can think
so
of.
I think this also goes hand in hand with research that is ongoing about neurodiversity, because the way that autism and other neurodivergent conditions express themselves in the female gender are not the same as they are expressed in the male gender. And that can be due to both biology, but also cultural norms and expectations of men and women. So a lot of the reason that men are diagnosed on the spectrum at a higher rate than women, especially as children, is because women are often, or girls are often, punished for neurodivergent traits, so they learn to mask them or hide them.
I had no idea.
Yes. So that's one of the things, like, so perhaps, and obviously autism is a spectrum for a reason, right? So like you have people who can mask easier or, not show outward traits, but still they're still the person inside, right? Like, so that's when we were talking earlier about in our one of our many tangents, when we're talking about like how things are diagnosed, they're usually diagnosed based on the effect that you have on others, not how it feels to be yourself. So because men or boys are far more disruptive in their symptoms, and also we only study men in medicine, usually white men, for to be honest, then we only know what it looks like, what autism or the spectrum looks like in white men, not in other categories of, culture, or not in any other cultural categories of human beings, to be honest. um so like, and the reason I'm saying this is because like I myself am on like the what is accepted to be like the lowest score to be on the spectrum. So on, someone would say, some might say I'm in the highest functioning side of the spectrum, which really means that like, while I my behavior can be seen as I don't know, like out there to some people, it does not like impact them in a very like significant way. Like if I was a person with not like that was nonverbal, that means like I don't speak to other people, then that might probably like make me less supposedly high functioning. But just because you learned a way to deal with, the hand that you were dealt, and you can mask something or observe rules of society in easier than other people on the spectrum, doesn't mean that, doesn't invalidate your experience, right?
It's very interesting because I'm not going to pretend I know much about this, and I'm very glad that you're here to tell me all of these things. But I have a few friends who have ADHD, and so through them I've been sort of learning more about it. And it's very
Also got
interesting because
diagnosed with that at 33. So
well, well, there you go. um,
so we can talk about that too.
but and something they've been telling me is it's ADHD has been a very useful skill through like centuries of being a human, basically. It's only
Oh, like
now in our
Leonardo da Vinci, definitely ADHD.
okay, I didn't know that. Because in our society now, where we have for the most part desk jobs, and we're supposed to sit still and quiet for 8 hours and do our work, and that is now where people with ADHD have a disadvantage, versus when we're like trying to escape deadly threats. People with ADHD would definitely have bigger chances of surviving them. So it's almost like because our society has changed so much that now people with ADHD stand out as sort of a negative thing, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
versus it was such an advantage for like centuries for them.
Well, there's one theory, and you're right. Like your friends have done a lot of reading. Like we go into these rabbit holes of reading, but you are right. In one of the prevailing theories is that ADHD is actually the remnants of the hunter gatherer um, kind of tribe. So, like your people with ADHD would be the people actually going and hunting, so
Yeah.
that like restlessness of always looking out for like the next thing, and like we're usually pretty good at recognizing patterns before someone else does, which people call it like out of the box thinking, and like sometimes I'll do something, like I can do something, for instance, I can create a very complicated set of calculations of how to weigh something, in terms of like relative to something else, to make like a determination, but then like I can't remember to submit my timesheet
Okay.
because like that level of like administrative detail is just superfluous to me. Like, I'm just like, it gets done whenever it gets done. I don't care about my timesheet, even though other people definitely care that I put my timesheet in on time for job purposes. But like, I'm like working on like these super, like, I would rather work on more complex problems than do like the day to day stuff.
Ooh, can I go into a sub tangent?
Yeah, go ahead, girl. Go
uh,
ahead.
so I've been referencing Crow as the media. He has a song called Alien, where has a line where he says, I'm an alien because I've never understood the sort of culture and customs of humankind because I don't
Yeah, that's
understand them
exactly
and
that.
they
Yep.
don't make sense. So that was just, now you talking to me, that reminded me of that.
So
Uh,
the way it feels sometimes for me is that on an intellectual level, right? I can know all these norms and why, or have a good guess as to why these norms are important, yet I still don't understand why they're needed. Like, I'm just like, on an intellectual level, I get it. I need to follow these norms. And it's usually around like things you say to people when you first meet them, or like conversations you are allowed to have versus conversations you're not allowed to have. I have a very hard time, and I don't know if this is like ADHD or being on the spectrum or both, that I have a very hard time understanding why people would lie to your face and then say something about you behind your back.
yeah, my friend who has ADHD also says that that is something she struggles with.
Yeah, I struggle a lot with like, because I guess because I'm so like compulsively honest,
Yeah,
that if I don't like you, I'm not gonna make an effort,
yeah,
because that takes away from like my energy, right? So if I don't like you, I'm not even gonna try to befriend you. And I'm usually a pretty like open person in terms of like, I am open to being anyone's friend. Like I really try not to even let biases or preconceptions mess with that. But like I do have my husband is like, you just trust. It's not even about trust, because it's not that I trust people too easily. It's that I don't understand that people can have ulterior motives that have nothing to do with, you know, what I think is a friendship, right? Like I'm just like, oh, we're just friends, like whatever. Like I'll help, because I'm like trying to help people. And it's like my husband's usually like, could you please not? Like, could you please slow down before you get hurt?
yeah.
Because I honestly, truly, like, I'm just baffled by the ability of some people to just say things they don't mean.
Okay, I have a question because
Yes, ma'am.
I've been wondering, and maybe it is because I'm in my sort of queer bubble, so I'm seeing things from a very different perspective than the majority.
Hmm.
But I feel like the time we live in right now is where there's a lot of things are questioned that were the norm for like centuries, and that we now sort of, especially like younger people, younger generations are trying to break up. Sort of like, this is what men wear, this is what women wear, sort of that stuff, but then also just sort of bigger things. Do you see that happening for like people on the spectrum?
I hope that we can move to a point where we're not talking about people on the spectrum. And even if I wasn't on the spectrum, I honestly think I would think this as well, is not about how we make other people feel, but how it feels to be us, and that people have curiosity about it rather than disdain.
Yeah,
Because while I do see how these, I mean, disabilities, to be honest, right, can be not great for the people who have them and who are, faced with living life with the disabilities. If we, instead of trying to diagnose people and make them fit a mold, instead of doing that, we try to understand and find ways that we could, you know, coexist or learn from people who think different from us because of culture or because of neurodivergence or both, then maybe I wouldn't feel so alien all the time, or other people on the spectrum wouldn't feel so out of place all the time. Like, I don't know how much of the trauma is based on the disability itself and how much of the trauma or the pain, right, is based on how society treats our different selves.
Okay. Because I think, I mean, a lot of it comes down back to capitalism, and we live in a society where, the amount of like hours you can work in like certain jobs, or like the like best degree that you can get in something counts so much more than other things.
Well, to be quite honest with you, and this is, I mean, I'm not trying to brag, like, this is something like my therapist and I talk about a lot, is that I can do, because sometimes I have to force myself to sit for 8 hours, and that's really hard for me to do. Sometimes
Yeah.
if I'm not engaged in a like task that consumes my entire being. But what she and I talk about a lot is that my 8 hours are not everyone else's 8 hours in a sense. Like, I can get my workday finished some days in 2 hours or less because I'm not like I'm not working in retail or anything. It's about based on like, did you finish your productivity goals right for the day?
Yeah.
And and if I am in a specific, plane, I can get done the same amount that a person get that non-neurodivergent person, right, gets done in 8 hours. I can get that done in two. So am I going to force myself to be just as productive as I was in those 2 hours in the rest of the 6 hours? Or am I going to find ways to like, okay, now that I'm done with like the super chunk of productivity that other people would have done in a day, can I parcel out a few like moments of me being able to rest? Because if not, I burn myself out.
See, and again, maybe I'm just in a bubble where this is sort of almost normal. And like I'm not on the spectrum, and I'm like not ADHD, but I've stupidly almost slowed down my work to the amount of work I have. Like if I have a
Yes.
lot of stuff done, I like get so much done. But then like the next day, I don't know, I have like a tenth of what I did the other day, and I can stretch that tenth over 8 hours because I'm like, oh well, I still have time. Whereas if I work in the same speed, I would have been done in an hour, and then it's like 7 hours of
Yeah,
free
but
time almost.
you see, that's how I know that you're not ADHD,
I know.
because I cannot regulate my speed.
Okay. But
I
then
just
like what I'm trying to say is
Yeah.
like in my company, it's almost like as long as you get stuff done, we don't care if you work 8 hours or if you worked an hour. Like as long as the stuff is done.
Well, which is why we're having like this conversation. Me, like, right, like I got like the best job now ever, where I have the flexibility of working when I need to work, even though I get more done than most people in my team, even. So, 'cause I'm just like, well, I can get whatever you guys get done in X amount of hours in just like 3 or 4, and then take it, try. Now that I'm medicated, it helps a little bit that I can try to like slow down a little bit. But usually I end up working, and I hope my employers are not patrons. They're never going to hear this. Um, where it ends up being like, unless there's a proposal, which is like one of the biggest things that you can take on in my job, right? And I do them start to finish. Unless there's a proposal, I am done usually by 6 hours every day.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, well, I work from home. Then now I'm just going to go and work on stuff that is for the podcast or for my shop or whatever. And I'm still available for them to call me if they need to discuss something. But I'm not going to like, the before times Adri would have just looked for more stuff and just burnt herself out. And I'm trying not to do that.
But like that, I mean, and I think that is the sort of change I think I see in our society at the moment is, and it's partly because of COVID, but like everyone who can have this flexibility, I think companies are realizing more and more that they should be more flexible. They should be having these options for workers of like, we appreciate you. We know that you do all that you need to do. And if today all you need to do is done in 2 hours, then like you'll get all the other time back. But then honestly, on like other days where maybe we need 9 hours out of you instead of eight, we know that you will then stick around for that additional hour or something. Because I think I'm seeing this happening.
Well, I hope it continues happening.
And I think if we approach life more from sort of like that angle, it would be more open to people with like disabilities, because then
Yeah,
it would
no,
be
for sure.
easier for them to fit in, versus where we like always exclude them because they can't sit still for 8 hours. But like if we are more fluid with what we actually think a job entails and what it should be, then we are opening the doors to other people.
Yeah. Actually, and when I was thinking about do we see any character on the spectrum, and we were like, I can't think of any female character on the spectrum. And I know canonically this is not true, but like Luna Lovegood strikes me as someone on the spectrum for sure.
Yeah. No, she's definitely the type of person that like doesn't understand humanity to the same degree. It's like
Well, also has a
she
very
doesn't.
rich imaginary life,
Yeah.
like intellectually curious, doesn't mask, like she's the character who wouldn't be masking her differences to
Yeah,
fit
and I
in.
think that's why so many people think she's such a great character, or she is their favorite character, is because like Luna actually just is who she is.
Exactly. And yeah, so that's where I get like a little bit, like I wish we had more canonical characters on the page, not just in this series, but like in everything else. Like I know there's like a lot of male characters that are headlining their own TV shows or novels who are neurodivergent, like ADHD, or on the spectrum or both. And what it ends up happening from what I've read in people who have these two diagnoses are that we often don't get caught until later on in life with these diagnoses, because one could be because people say, well, you have good grades, therefore you shouldn't have ADHD, right? Or you seem to be doing okay, you seem to be meeting people's eyes, therefore you're not on the spectrum. And those are just some items of what it means to be those things, but it's not the definitive checklist, right? And as people, and as doctors are getting to understand these disabilities or these conditions, and understanding how they can affect different swaths of the population, we are getting a better understanding of what that could look like. And I've read this once from a person that I follow. Like Twitter has been amazing on this, right? Which is a sad thing to say because Twitter is usually a trash fire. Someone was like, if you know an autistic person, you have met one autistic person or a person on the spectrum. You do not, like, that is, it's just such a, well, it's kind of like a personality thing. Like how do you, those things interact with your personality and your background and your upbringing in such a specific way that you cannot make a generalization
Yeah,
based
but
on that.
like, don't you think as society we should strive to like get away from generalizations in
Oh, for sure. It's
general,
just
which is a
that was,
generalization in itself,
well,
that
that was a
sentence.
comment that was based off like people saying like listen to people on the spectrum, and then someone was like, yeah, this is great, but also like please keep in mind that the experiences of one person on the spectrum or one person with ADHD is just their own
Yeah,
experience. It is not like our global experience. So for
yeah,
instance, someone like me who like has struggled, but not at the level that other people have struggled because of their conditions, right? I can't say like this is what it's like for everyone. Like for me, I've been great. I'm grateful that I've been able to navigate with all these like coping mechanisms that I've collected along the way, and that now I have more knowledge to understand myself and why I feel a certain way. But that doesn't mean like other people don't struggle in very different and real ways than I do. So yeah, it's just
Chad, I've been on a similar-ish journey. So
talk to me about it.
I'm arrow ace and non-binary. All three
Okay.
of them, aromanticism, asexualism, asexuality, and
Hmm.
non-binary, all three of them spectrums. Because again, I have one experience of being these three labels. Basically, they don't have to be the same experience for someone else who might even have all the same three labels. And I
Oh,
think
for sure.
I actually struggled quite a lot when I came out as Arrow Ace initially, because I was like, I sort of want to have a definitive answer of if is this me, because there's different ways of how you can be Arrow Ace or even asexual. To the point where I had to learn, okay, no, this is like an umbrella term. There's different ways on how you can fit under this umbrella term, but I need to accept that I fit under this because of these specific reasons. But then also, um, as it is when you are sort of in a small minority group, when people ask me questions, and I always encourage people asking me questions because I'd rather have have them educated than assuming something. I'm also always
Correct. Yeah.
saying, for me specifically, this is X, but for someone else on with the same labels, it could be Y. Like there isn't a specific way of being arrow ace.
Yeah. Just like there's no way of being like a cis straight person,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like,
that's it's the same thing. Like if you were to, I mean, I'm using you as example. I hope that's
yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
But if you were to go away and be like, I know one German person, so therefore all German people are like this. Or if I
Oh,
were to
for
go,
yeah, but yeah, I get yeah, I am very familiar with that mode of thinking. Um, I don't know if I
you know
told you.
how people are like, I have a black friend. It was like, well,
Yeah.
just because you know one black person.
Well, no, and like the black friend is like, I'm actually barely an acquaintance, by the way.
Yeah. So that's why I'm like, we should just go away from all of this and treat every individual as an individual.
Well, because we all have all these like rich internal lives, and like like just because you have like those three labels doesn't mean that you journey through life in the same way as someone else with those three labels, even if you live in the same city.
Yeah, yeah. Because
Um,
there's so many things that make you you that are that is why it makes you unique, and that's why we are individuals.
well, okay, so let's get back to Holly Scamander here. We went on a lot of tangents. Um, so I imagine a less out there Luna. You know what I mean? Like, because Newt strikes me as someone who is on the spectrum, but is not completely comfortable being his whole kooky self.
I thought of someone else,
Ooh, who
but
else?
it might be controversial. Ariana Dumbledore.
You know what? I can also see that. But we don't know enough about Ariana to like say, I don't think
No, no, no.
definitively. Yeah.
And then there's the whole obscurial thing, which
Exactly, which is
makes it a bit weird. So
and complicated. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I gotcha. But even like Dumbledore, right? Like when we think about someone like Dumbledore is definitely, if not on the spectrum, like accepting enough to see beyond people.
yeah,
And again, still a male character. So I I'm thinking like like Holly Scamander would be a less like a nerdier version, if that is possible, of Luna Lovegood, and very into that one specific interest, which is these
beast.
magical creatures or
Yeah,
beasts, and understanding and learning as much from them as possible and taking care of them and like all these things. But that brings to mind, like, the entire thing about Newt is that he is a traveler, right? And
Yeah.
as a man in that era, he's able to travel freely from the UK to the United States with this briefcase full of creatures, which is completely illegal. And she would have an interest in beasts. Other than Grubby Plank, I don't think we see any female characters who are super interested in beasts, right?
No, and I also thought about that, and I was like, the only people I could come up with is Hagrid, very obviously. We have Charlie Weasley's for dragons. We have the predecessor of Hagrid, which is Sylvanus Kettleburn.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a bit of a stretch, but I listed Herpo de Fowl, who was the creator of a basilisk, so, and also the first creator of a Horcrux. So generally, great guy.
Oh, like, for sure, the person I would like to go on a date with.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm so sad he's dead. So sad.
So yeah, I think it is a pretty male-dominated field.
So then she would stick out even more because, like, she's a woman alone traveling, and
Yeah.
then in the Nomage world, she would stick out like that, and then in the Wizarding world, she would stick out because she is a woman interested in Fantastic Beasts.
I suppose this goes very off the rails, but if we are supposed to believe that the series is following World War II and it ends in 1945 as World War II ends, and I think there's a lot of theorizing going on that eventually it'll be in Germany for at least part of a film.
Mm-hmm.
Germany not very good with women's right at that point because Hitler needed women to have children, and that's literally all they were good for.
Well, I mean, I feel like if you like take the pulse of the entire world about like up till 1945, and even now, sometimes I swear, like that is the only job, respectable job a woman can have is like being pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen
Yeah,
to
but like the
and
UK at least had the suffragette movement in like 1918, so like Germany doesn't even do that until like the 1950s. So
Jesus, Germany, come on, man.
well, there was a world war. We were busy.
I hear that. I hear that though. Yeah. So like, yeah, I just the concept of women as people is fairly new. We all know this.
Yeah, and I was wondering if it was different in a Wizarding World. And I found that the first female minister we have is in 1798 and till 1811. Funny enough, her name was, and I'm gonna mispronounce this because I have no idea how to say this. Artem- how would you say it? Artemisia?
Artemisia? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Lufkin?
yeah. So we even have the goddess of what's her?
Of the Hunt?
Yeah, the goddess of
Yes.
hunting. Back in the name.
Well, and then I see here that, we have that in the entire Ministry of Magic, right? We have 10 female ministers, but 26 male. So
Yeah.
there's a quite disproportionate amount there based on just gender. And so we have like that question of like, are there enough even representations of women in the wizarding world, right? Or even female explorers? Like that is unheard of.
Yeah, and I probably took this a bit far, but I was then curious enough to look in. Do we have female like ministry heads, department heads? Like, do we even see women in higher positions? And I could barely find anything. It was
Yeah,
really
and like
shocking.
then we have like Dolores Umbridge, which is like not a great character. Like,
Yeah, we have
I mean,
her, we have Amelia Bones, and
which
that's
is
pretty much it.
so we have like a good and a bad, but mostly we hear a lot from the bad. So of course we're always going to think like maybe women shouldn't.
It's very shocking, honestly. I was, and I mean, we don't know that much about the ministry. I get it. We like don't see it that much in the books. But like even in the added on material for like old Pottermore and all of that stuff, there still barely is anything about women in like ministry positions that are like higher ministry positions, I should say.
Yeah, and like sometimes I'm just like, well, maybe we should have more representation, not just in this series, but like in general about like women undergoing journeys that aren't like perilous to their sexual well-being. Like, let's not make this a trope of like, well, she has to get raped, you know? Because
Yeah,
that's like, have you ever watched Outlander?
I have not. No.
So one of the things that I mean, I watch Outlander, but it's not for the content. It's mostly for the eye candy.
I know enough about it to understand that. I've been in Scotland. I've actually been to part of the nature sets of the stuff of the show.
Oh, well,
So
we need to talk about that later. But so Outlander, the thing that it does really well in season 1, and something that I, often talk to my one of my other friends who's also a super like she watched it in tandem with me, was that rather than sacrifice the female, because like it's so easy to sacrifice the woman to the altar of like rape in like a historical drama, because the way that the creators say it is, well, it was those times women were raped all the time, you know?
yeah,
Um, and there is that threat of rape always um, endemic in the show. But what it turns out being is that season 1 shows us, seasons 1 and 2 show us that the trauma that Claire, the female lead of the show, carries is not due to rape or sexual abuse. It's due to trauma that she had during the war, because she was a nurse. She was a nurse in World War II or one, two, I believe. And she, travels back to time and like is in this like Scottish, almost kingdom, I guess. And Jamie, the male character, uh, is his he is actually a virgin when they meet, which is like very unlike our patriarchal idea of narrative, right?
yeah.
And he is like this rough soldier type person, character, but his trauma is not from the war. His trauma stems from being raped by this Englishman, and like all these other traumas that he has are based on his own sexual abuse. So it kind of flips the script about like what trauma looks like for either gender, because it's the easier way out in like historical romance or any historical novel is to be like, and the threat of rape.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so like I started watching it for the eye candy, then I was like, wow, like this is not that I'm like I don't love like trauma porn, like I'm not good at that, but I think they do it so well and so thoughtfully, at least in those first 2 seasons, that I was just like, wow, that's really interesting how the trauma that she carries is not the trauma that female characters carry often in this type of narrative. So it's like gender flipping the trauma without flipping the genders of the characters experiencing it.
Do you know what? Every person so far who's told me about the Outlander and why I should watch it has not once have I ever heard of this. I'm like, all of the stuff I've so far heard were all the stuff where I was like, this is the reason why I'm not watching it.
Oh, you mean the hot sex? Like that's
Yeah.
why, yeah. Like
I'm like, yeah, I'm the asexual here. I like don't enjoy that. So nope.
yeah, no. So obviously, I am a human person that loves sex. I
That's
watched it.
cool.
I watched it with the promise of hot sex, and like the actor is very hot to me. Like I was like, I'm very attracted to this person. I love the accent. I'm like, I'm all about this, and also like it's a period piece, right? Like, but they reeled me in with that. Why I stayed is not that, because it really has really interesting ideas of gender roles and and all these other things, like, oh, like he's like a macho man who, like, I don't know, gets upset if she's too assertive for him because of, she's out of time, right? She's too assertive for that time as a
Yeah.
woman. But like he's not like a total brute about it either. Like there's nuance in there.
Okay.
I think what I would like to see for like Holly Scamander as a female explorer of
Yeah.
worlds, especially as she ventures to New York City, is to not have that constant threat of rape.
Yeah. I would also very much like if we could get rid of the love triangle because I find it so annoying. But that's
So that
also
love triangle
my,
would be between Lita Lestrange and um, her brother, presumably,
yeah.
Theseus, unless we gender flip Theseus as well. And then it would be like lesbian love triangle. And yeah, like I don't know, like I don't love the lesbian love triangle or the straight love triangle angle anyway. Don't love that. It's kind of like Twilighty, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and that's probably sort of my sort of sexual identity more coming through than anything that I'm just like really bored with those stories. But I also don't think it does anything for the Fantastic Beasts series. Like it doesn't really add anything.
So you're right. Like I don't think it's that your like asexuality is the factor that makes you be like, ugh, this I don't like this. I think it's more about like what purpose does this serve the story?
Yeah,
And
and
if it
it's
doesn't
just
serve a
none.
purpose, and if it's just like tension for the sake of tension and not tension for the sake of advancement of a particular storyline or plot point or something, then it just falls flat.
Yeah. However, I would like to see Holly's friendship with Jacob because that
I
would be
would
very
love to
interesting to
see
me.
that. I would also love to see Holly's friendship with a gender flipped Jacob, only because in my mind, I'm picturing Melissa McCarthy on Gilmore Girls.
Oh, that would be fun. But I would actually say I want Jacob to remain Jacob.
No, no, for sure, for sure. Love Jacob. But like I was thinking but if we gender flipped Jacob, it's basically that character from Gilmore Girls, but in 1930s, 1940s.
Because I suppose for me, it's almost the thing where everyone's like, you can't be like friends with the
Friends with,
opposite gender. Ugh.
opposite gender, especially if you're both like straight, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I gotcha. Like, I
yeah,
would love to see representation of a non-romantic relationship between people who are attracted to people of the gender that that friend is, you know?
yeah,
Because there's a lot of us are friends with people of the gender we may or may not be attracted to, and that doesn't mean it's like filled with like longing or despair.
yeah. Exactly. It's just it's sort of a thing in media where you just don't see it at all, and then like in your like real life, it's like, but it is a totally normal thing. Why don't we ever see it in media?
Well, media led me to believe that if I was friends with a guy, right, because that's my preference,
Yeah,
um, then I should look at them as prospective partners rather than just like, no, but he's just my friend, dude. Like, it's like always in the back of my head there was that like, but what if, like even though I wasn't really attracted to them, because
yeah.
there was like a pressure, I guess, like media wise and like society wise, there's always the pressure of like, well, you can't truly be friends, there must be something more.
It's very silly, isn't it? Especially in a society now where we're like, but people could be attracted to the same gender or to both genders, and then it's
Or
like,
to any gender expression, to be honest, like,
yeah,
and
it's like,
like you were saying, like it's a spectrum, like sexuality is a spectrum, and that like I'm definitely not 100% like on the straight side, and like it is what it is.
yeah, and still it's so normal to see like two female characters be very sort of like almost like
close intimate friends without being sexual about it or
yeah,
being
yeah.
like romantic about it. Yeah.
And it's such a normal thing to see. Whereas it's like it, as I've
Well,
said, I
unless
think
okay, so unless you're like my lesbian professors in my master's degree, in which case you would read all of those like close female relationships, especially in Victorian literature, as like heavily lesbian.
well, there's a thing which is probably true to a degree because that just didn't exist at the time, so
Yeah,
it
no,
wasn't
for sure.
written
So
down.
yeah, so I think it also depends on like, your perspective on life and like, how you interpret like certain modes of affection, right? So like to to me, a woman who is usually not, attracted to other women, I'm like, oh, when it says like a fierce embrace, I'm like, oh, they must have really missed each other, like,
Yeah.
but like my lesbian professor is like, they're clearly in love with each other
Yeah, it
and they're
is quite
expressing
interesting.
their sexuality.
I'm a huge Scrubs fan, and I remember, and it's still talked about today. And obviously, as all media, it's a product of its time. But like, it was a huge deal that the two male characters, Turk and JD, are like such close friends. Because that wasn't really a thing that we've seen up until that time in media, or not as much really, I suppose. Where it's like, oh, we actually can see just two friends of the same gender be like super close with each other, especially two male friends.
We need to normalize non-romantic and non-sexual relationships because they
Yeah,
could even have the same level or even more of intimacy and connection, because those are not the only modes of connection between human beings.
as someone who only does platonic, let me tell you, you can have a fulfilling life without romantic and sexual relationship.
Yeah, and like that's, like you just got to find what first of all works for you, and then not like shove it down everyone's throats as the media has been doing with friendships of opposite genders and relationships as the only goal of
Yeah.
life.
So do you think if we keep Tina female, we
Hmm.
would get we would get a relationship between Holly and Tina?
Based, okay, so if I was writing it, right? Absolutely. I'm all
Yeah.
for it. If this if the current author of the series was writing it, she would say definitely they're having a relationship. It's just never on screen.
Do you mean like all the gay witches and wizards that are supposedly around and do that we never
Yeah,
get to see
Grindelwald and Dumbledore. We would only maybe see them together, like
in a
side by
mirror?
side in the Mirror of Erised.
That's the only time.
That's the only time. Like,
Exchanging blood because AIDS isn't a thing.
come on, not a thing. Um, and yeah, like I don't think we would be seeing. I don't think we would be seeing like overt like glances into each other's eyes or whatever.
The more we talk about Holly Scamander, the more I want that to be reality. Because wouldn't it be
Right.
so cool if there's like, I mean, Queenie now after movie two, maybe less so, but like you'd have Jacob, Tina, and Holly, and like one of them is a Muggle, and that's the only male character out of that trio. You have an Aura, and you have like adventurer and like Magizoologist. I don't know, I can't pronounce the word. Uh,
Magizoologist.
yeah, that sounds
You
correct.
and I you and I have the same problem with like pronouncing things, so I feel very at home.
um, and but then also Dumbledore sends Holly instead of Holly's older brother Theseus, who is a
Exactly. And
war
it's like,
hero.
so we have like an anointed heroine by Dumbledore rather than another dude anointed by Dumbledore to do his bidding.
Yes. And also for someone, that author has said that she's all for strong female characters, and then the leader for 7 book novel series was a male, and now the leader for 5 film series is a male.
Which is, again, why we started the Girl Who Lived segment.
So
Because, again, like, it's this thing of, like, okay, so you're, like, so into, like, strong female characters, but, like, you get to choose, right? Like, you get to choose who does what. And, like, she could have been like, well, she's probably like, well, but Newt was a man in, like, the 7 canonical books. But then it's such an easy thing to say, like, you thought he was a man, but
also
it was
Newt
always a
works
woman
for both
pretending to be a
genders.
man, you know?
Yeah, and Newt works for both genders, so maybe we just all assumed as readers that he was male.
But even if he, like, Newt, the character, is referenced in the books as a he, it's such an easy thing to say, like, well, because of the time, it
Yeah.
was a woman pretending to be a man, but the name never
Ooh,
changed.
like the female Pope.
So, like, there are ways, there are ways around it, I think.
Yeah, I
Um,
also think that we would have been very forgiving as a fandom to be like, yeah, let's give us a
what?
female hero.
Are you kidding me? A female explorer, like, that is not named Dora the Explorer? Yes.
We would have been all for it. Uh,
Like, that is the only female explorer I can think of off the top of my head in media. And it's, like, aimed at children.
yeah. And also, I think something else that you would like see, like remember out of the first film, the like everyone's favorite scene inside the suitcase, um, where you'd see a female handling all these big, massive, dangerous beasts and be like the one that knows everything about them.
Oh, it'd be great, wouldn't it? Oh.
Do you know what? Sorry, slight tangent, but football, as in soccer,
Mhm.
in 1990, so 90, 2 years before I was born, it was the first time women in Germany were allowed to wear like football shoes with the spikes. Because before then, even though there was a football league for them and all of that, they were like, it was said the skin was too soft to wear those shoes because they could
Well, you know what? Like,
injure themselves.
I want to show them some calluses I've harnessed since childhood that prove otherwise on my
Yeah,
feet.
yeah. But like just sort of like that prejudice, and that was like, 30 years ago, not too long ago. So now
Yeah, not that long
imagine
ago.
a female working with these like dangerous beasts, because some of them are really dangerous.
Yeah, and like a female witch, right? A female witch who is like working with these like dangerous animals and like wearing practical clothing.
Yes.
I mean, don't get
Oh,
me wrong. Don't get me wrong, Ario. I love fashion and I love pink. I love nothing more than that. But like, there's nothing saying like it can't be practical and fashionable and pink.
see,
I'm just
that's
leaving it
that.
out there.
That's where we are different people.
No, and that's fine. And that's fine. That's completely fine. But like, my thing with pink is more about the author's like insistence that anyone who wears pink or bright colors is terrible, is a terrible human being. And I'm
Do you
like,
mean our resident Dementor Umbridge?
well, and Rita Skeeter, with her acid green quills and acid green everything, or bright colors. I'm
and
just
and
like,
her
well,
mannish hands.
oh, I hate her so much. Not, I mean, like the description, not the
Yeah.
character itself. But like, like you have me with my Caribbean sensibilities and lover of like bright colors, going like, does that mean I'm not good in this world? Like, should I not like bright colors?
Also, something so stupid like which color you like shouldn't like say anything about you. That's just a
But
color.
it's for a series of about acceptance and stuff, like it has really set standards to which the characters are held to.
Yeah.
Like,
There's also a lot of hatred against maroon. I just want to put it out there.
Oh,
What has
yeah.
maroon ever done to the author?
Uh, I think what we've gotten to this point is we want Holly Scamander as canon, get rid of that love triangle.
Yeah, it's
Men
doing
and
nothing.
women can be friends without like some sexual tension in there. And let's make, Holly and Tina happen. I'm here for it.
Yes. Oh, it'd be so
I
great.
could imagine Holly and Tina in their 80s just being like chill queer witches. Yes.
Yes. Also, Luna marries into that family.
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. Like they find a way to adopt or, get pregnant, either of them, and then Luna meets and falls in love with a member of that family.
There's I'm just gonna plug one of my favorite episodes of Speak Beastie, which I'm no longer a host on, so I feel less bad about plugging it. Where they broke down the people of color in the Fantastic Beast films, and that is episode 89. I'm not on a host on that episode, so go listen. And it talks about that way back, like 2015, probably more like 2014, when we hadn't had the announcement that Eddie Redmayne was going to play Newt Scamander. There was a part of the fandom that was convinced Newt was going to be black because there was this Rita Skeeter article on Pottermore about Quidditch Cup where like everyone meets years later and like Luna is there with her husband, I think it's Rolf Scamander. And Rolf Scamander is described as swarthy by Rita Skeeter, which is sort of an offensive way of saying dark-skinned. So people were really there for like having Newt Scamander as a person of color. And then you get Eddie Redmayne, who's like whiter than white.
Wow.
If we can't have female Newt, we could have had, Newt as a person of color.
Oh, we definitely could have had.
What a missed opportunity.
Yeah, makes me sad. Well, I think we're done. We could have had this, make it happen. We need a fanfic. Thank you so much, Ario, for joining me today for this lovely conversation.
It's been so much fun. I love listening to this podcast. I always love when I get invited to talk to you guys. You are so much cleverer than me. I think both of you, Helene and you.
No, I think I think this is imposter syndrome talking, and it's not.
Because every time I listen to you, I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's such a good take. So I always learn a lot listening to you guys. So thank you for making such a great podcast. I do.
What is learning without laughter,
I always I listen to you on my walks and I walk through the forest and laugh like a maniac. Like I'm just always praying I'm not meeting anyone because I'm just a stupid person grinning and walking around. I'm just like, yeah.
I love this.
Support this show by going to patreon.com/Occhiopolitics. Our patrons keep this show going. You can find us online at Occhiopolitics.com, and we are at Occhiopolitics on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can email us your thoughts at info@Occhiopolitics.com. Leave us a voicemail at 915-996-1699. And you might just hear yourself on the podcast. Adriana Wilson is the founder and creative director of the podcast. Helene Karp is the producer and social media manager. Allison Pullman is the audio wizard and editor who makes us sound so good. Cover art and physical rewards are designed by Adriana Wilson. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are expressly their own and not representative of their employers or associates. Occhiopolitics is part of the MuggleNet family of podcasts.